Welcome to our video about the fascinating world of Pokemon and their placement on the Tree of Life. Today, we are taking a closer look at Arbok and its relationship with the Archelosauria. Both groups are part of the Diapsida. The Diapsida are a major group of sauropsids. They are the most diverse group of sauropsids in Earth's history. Diapsids include purely terrestrial representatives, as well as aquatic and flying forms. Both the adaptation to life in water and the ability to fly developed independently multiple times within different diapsid groups. The name Diapsida refers to the two openings in the cheek or temporal region, tempora, behind the eye socket, orbita, called the upper and lower temporal fenestrae. This skull configuration is called a diapsid skull. See also skull types of amniotes. The function of the windows is to save bone mass and, in turn, reduce weight and provide some flexibility to the skull. Additionally, they offer extra pathways and attachment sites for the jaw muscles. The lower opening is bordered by the same skull bones that are involved in the single window in the skull of fossil synapsids, squamosal, SQ, postorbital, PA, and jugal, J, as well as originally quadratojugal, QJ. The upper window is framed by squamosal, postorbital, and parietal, P, and in fossil representatives, the postfrontal often joins. The diapsid skull is indeed the nominal characteristic of the diapsids, but it represents a rather primitive state that has independently changed multiple times in different groups during diapsid evolution. For example, in the squamates, which include lizards, as well as in some early forms of Archosauromorpha, there is no lower temporal arch presumably. Both the lower temporal arch of tuataras and that of crocodiles did not revert to the original diapsid skull configuration of, for instance, Petrolacosaurus but evolved secondarily from a catapsid state. If turtles belong to the diapsids, then both temporal fenestrae would be completely closed again in them. Also, in modern birds, the originally diapsid skull anatomy is no longer recognizable due to numerous modifications in the course of adaptations for flight and the development of the beak apparatus. Similarly, in amphisbaenians and snakes, both subgroups of squamates with highly specialized skulls, there are no obvious temporal fenestrae anymore. The modern diapsids are divided into two main groups, the Lepidosauria, which include tuataras, lizards, and snakes, and the Archosaur, which include crocodiles and birds. Here, too, the systematics are somewhat more complex when fossil taxa are included. According to recent findings, turtles are likely also diapsids. The earliest fossil finds of diapsids date back to the Upper Carboniferous of North America. These are relatively small, lizard-like representatives, described under the names Petrolacosaurus and Spinoequalis. Both are very primitive diapsids that lived before the split into Lepidosauria and Archosaur. Let's now briefly discuss the order, Squamata. With 11,349 species, 7,176 lizards, 3,971 snakes, and 202 amphisbaenians, the squamata represent a significant part of the terrestrial vertebrate fauna, more than mammals with about 6,400 species. Over 96% of the recent, known reptile species are squamates. Most squamates are medium-sized animals. The largest recent squamates are the reticulated python, Python reticulatus, and the green anaconda, Unex murinus, which can reach a length of about 6 to 7 meters. The smallest is Bruchisia micra, a pygmy leaf chameleon that only grows to about 3 centimeters. All squamates have a more or less elongated body, often with a round cross-section, but it can also be flattened or high-backed, like in chameleons. Squamates inhabit almost all terrestrial habitats. They live on all continents except Antarctica. With the sea snakes, Hydrophini, they have also conquered the coastal regions of tropical seas. Most squamates live in the tropics, with species diversity decreasing as you move north. They are absent in most of Canada, Alaska, Greenland, and northern Siberia. The viviparous lizard, Zoetoca vivipara, and the common European adder, Vipera berus, are the reptile species that extend the furthest north, even beyond the Arctic Circle. The southernmost squamate is the iguana-like Lialemus magellanicus, which still lives in Tierra del Fuego. The scaling of the epidermis, outer skin, can vary greatly. It is finest in geckos and can consist of flat, smooth, or keeled shields, but can also be equipped with spines or protruding tubercles. Iguanas often have blade-like spiny scales that form a crest on the neck, back, tail, or dewlap. Some dune-dwelling lizards have fringes of protruding scales on their toes to prevent sinking into the sand. These fringes help basilisks run quickly over water surfaces. Geckos and anoles have adhesive lamellae on the underside of their toes, formed by the epidermis and consisting of many tiny hairs. The top layer of the epidermis does not grow with the animal and is regularly shed, every 3 to 4 weeks in many lizards or every 6 to 10 months in snakes or chameleons. Before shedding, it is lifted by shedding hairs and separated from the new epidermis beneath by air or lymph fluid. Geckos eat the shed skin immediately after shedding. Shedding occurs in patches in most lizards and as a whole, exuvii, in snakes or limbless lizards. Rattlesnakes form a ring scale during shedding, which becomes part of their tail rattle. The dermis, located under the epidermis, is thick and consists of three-dimensionally arranged bundles of connective tissue. In lizards, osteoderms, flat bone plates, are formed here, whose shape and location roughly correspond to those of the scales above them. Osteoderms can form a closed armor in various skinks and some anguimorphs. Under the dermis lies the subcutaneous layer, hypodermis, which loosely lies on the musculature and is formed by horizontally arranged connective tissue. The skull of squamates differs from the diapsid skull by the reduction of the lower of the two temporal arches. In snakes, amphisbaenians, and some limbless skinks, the upper temporal arch is also reduced. Another characteristic is the so-called streptostele, the highly increased internal mobility of the squamate skull. This is achieved by the quadrate bone, a bone of the primary jaw joint of reptiles, resting movable on the squamosal bone. The skull mobility is most pronounced in snakes. Their lower jaw consists of two halves. The tooth-bearing dentaries are not fused at the front end but are flexibly connected by fibrous cartilage, symphysis, and are also movable relative to the other lower jaw bones. However, there is also a tendency, adapted to a burrowing lifestyle, to resolidify the skull. This is particularly pronounced in amphisbaenians, anguimorphs, and typhlopoids. In some burrowing skinks, girdle-tailed lizards, true lizards, and beaded lizards, the upper and lateral skull parts are additionally reinforced by small bone plates, osteoderms. The parietal foramen, an opening for the parietal organ in the skull roof, remains free in lizards. Snakes do not have a parietal organ. Tooth-bearing skull bones in lizards are the maxillaries in the upper jaw and the dentaries in the lower jaw. Additionally, palatal bones can carry teeth. The palatine bone, palatinum, in some anguimorphs, the pterygoid bone, pterygoid, in some teiids and lizards, and both bones in snakes. The teeth are rootless and attached to the inner side of the jawbones, pleurodonty. This is considered a plesiomorphy of the squamates. Replacement teeth grow from a bud at the base of the old teeth. In agamas, chameleons, the spade-tailed amphisbaenians, trogonophidae, and snakes, another form of tooth attachment, acrodonty, occurs. Here, the teeth sit on the upper edge of the jaw. Agamas and chameleons are therefore grouped within the iguanians as the Monophyllum acrodonta. Squamates with acrodont dentition do not undergo tooth replacement. The teeth are normally homodont, uniform. Most squamates feed on insects, and their teeth are conical with 1, geckos, 2, or 3 cusps, true lizards, teiids, most iguanids. Mollusc-eating squamates, such as some skinks, anguimorphs, teiids, and monitor lizards, have broad, flattened teeth. In large monitor lizards, the posterior edge is finely serrated. Many herbivorous iguanids have teeth with flat crowns and serrated edges. In the case of the spiny-tailed agamids, which also feed on seeds and hard plant parts, the teeth are fused into a chewing ridge. The teeth of snakes are conical and curved backwards. The fangs of venomous snakes are equipped with a venom-conducting groove or a hollow channel. Vipers, Viperidae, and mole vipers, Atractospididae, have rear-facing teeth in a resting position, which are erected when the mouth is opened. In blind snakes, Typhlopidae, slender blind snakes, Leptotyphlopidae, and African egg-eating snakes, Dasypeltis, dentition is reduced. The skeleton of squamates has often been drastically modified to adapt to different lifestyles. Most have 5 cervical vertebrae like chameleons, while others, like monitor lizards, have up to 9. From the 3rd cervical vertebra, there can be short ribs, cervical ribs. The number of trunk vertebrae before the sacrum, depends on the elongation of the trunk and can range from 23 to 29 in geckos, and from 74 to 110 in their relatives, the Pygopodidae. Skinks have 26 to 107 trunk vertebrae, 4-legged anguimorphs have 29 to 36, and their limbless relatives have 51 to 68. Snakes can have over 400 vertebrae, up to 300 of which are trunk vertebrae. All trunk vertebrae bear ribs. Only the 4-legged species possess shoulder girdles and front legs, with the exception of the 2-legged amphisbaenians, Bipedidae, and the genus Bipes of the Gymnothalmidae family. The shoulder girdle consists of the scapula, coracoid, clavicle, and interclavicle. The last 2 are connected to the cartilaginous sternum. 2 indentations in the coracoid, which in some forms have evolved into windows, are considered a synapomorphy of the squamates. The pelvic girdle consists of the ilium, ischium, and pubis. The 3 bones meet in the acetabulum. The pelvic girdle is partially or completely reduced in limbless forms. The tendency to reduce limbs occurs in all taxa above the family level, except for iguanians. Within the gecko-like groups, it is the Pygopodidae. Within the skink-like groups, there are forms with reduced limbs in skinks, in the genus Chamasaura, and in the genera Bachia and Calyptomydus. Among the anguimorphs, some species of Anguidae and all species of Annelidae lack limbs. The same applies to all 3,000 species of snakes. Large snakes still have a rod-shaped pelvic remnant in the abdomen and, with the cloacal spur, a rudimentary remnant of hind limbs. The eyes vary greatly depending on the species and can be very large in nocturnal groups, such as various geckos, while in others, like some blind snakes, they can be almost completely reduced and without pigment. Nocturnal species have vertically oval to slit-shaped pupils, while diurnal species usually have round pupils. The rather large orbits are separated by an interorbital septum, partition, and the eyes are controlled by 4 straight and 2 oblique eye muscles, as well as the retractor bulbi muscle. The eyeball is reinforced around the cornea, in most squamates except for snakes, by a scleral ring. Tear glands are present. The nictitating membrane is kept lubricated by secretions from Harderian and nictitating membrane glands. In snakes and some other squamates, such as many geckos, the nictitating membrane is fused with the lower eyelid into a rigid spectacle. Secretions from these glands are drained into the oral cavity via nasolacrimal ducts. The retina usually has only 2 or 3 different types of cones, although some higher snakes also have rods. Some squamates, e.g. Ahatulla, have the ability to see binocularly. Studies on the night vision of the helmet gecko, Tarantula chazalii, have shown that its eyes can distinguish colors at night, when humans are already colorblind. This is possibly because its eyes contain only cones. When the mouth is closed, olfactory, chemical, perception occurs through the nostrils via a vestibule to the actual nasal cavity with olfactory epithelium and internal nasal opening. The sensory epithelia are usually located on the roof of the nasal cavity, and their surface area is increased by an outgrowth, called a conchus. In this outgrowth, some squamates have enlarged nasal glands, often for salt excretion, such as in desert dwellers like spiny-tailed ogomas, Uromastyx, and the marine iguana, Amblyrhynchus cristatus. The external nostrils of some highly aquatic groups, like sea snakes, Hydrophini, the marine iguana, and water snakes, Homolopsini, are closable. Another organ for olfactory perception is the Jacobson's organ or vomeronasal organ. Embryonically, it forms by separation from the nasal cavity and later is no longer connected to it. It opens through 2 ducts to the roof of the mouth, where odor particles are then transported to the sensory epithelia of the vomeronasal organ by the tip of the tongue. The odor particles are picked up by the tongue regularly moving in and out of the mouth. This process, particularly common in monitor lizards, Varanus, and snakes, is called tongue flicking. Taste buds are mainly found on the tongue but also on the roof of the mouth and the oral mucosa. In snakes, taste buds are only present on the oral mucosa. It was long debated whether squamates use their sense of taste. In a choice experiment conducted in 2001, green anoles, Anolis carolinensis, rejected food insects treated with bitter substances, while preferring insects treated with sweeteners over normally tasting insects. These preferences remained even with closed vomeronasal ducts. Thus, the sense of taste in reptiles that do not primarily use the vomeronasal organ may play a role in prey selection. Lizards, such as those of the genus Lacerta, apparently can distinguish all four taste qualities: sweet, sour, salty, bitter. The hearing organ consists of the outer ear, tympanic cavity, and inner ear. The eardrum is almost always at the level of the head surface. In some squamates, the outer ear is reduced as the eardrum is covered by scaly skin, or the edges of the tympanum are fused with the eardrum. In 2010, it was experimentally confirmed that the gecko Certodactylus philippinicus can orient itself to the Earth's magnetic field. This was the first evidence of a magnetic sense in squamates. Recent molecular biological studies have questioned the relationships between the major taxa of squamates, challenging the monopoly of Scleroglossa, Autarchoglossa, and Syncomorpha. This has resulted in a completely different phylogenetic tree, which is now supported by some anatomical features. The Diapsids are at the base of the cladogram, with a single-tipped tongue, while all other squamates are placed in the new taxon Bifurcata. The Bifurcata have a varying degree of bifurcated tongue, from slightly notched, as in geckos, to deeply forked, as in Diapsids, monitor lizards, and snakes. The only exception is chameleons, whose tongues are secondarily specialized for capturing prey. The Bifurcata split into a dichotomy: the gecko-like groups, whose hatchlings have paired egg teeth, and the Unidentata, which have only one egg tooth. Within the Unidentata, there are the Synsiformata and Episquamata. The Synsiformata include skinks, girdled lizards, and night lizards. The Episquamata consist of the Laterata, including some families otherwise classified as syncomorphs, and the Toxicophora. According to the Toxicophora concept, the ability of venomous squamates like beaded lizards, venomous snakes, and vipers to produce toxins arose only once in a common ancestor about 200 to 230 million years ago. The Toxicophora include snakes, anguimorphs, and iguanians. The latter two are sister groups. Thus, snakes are not classified with anguimorphs as in the previously presented morphologically based cladogram, and iguanians are not at the base of the cladogram but are high in the crown group. The Toxicophora concept is further supported by the discovery of venom-producing glandular tissue in the upper and lower jaws of an iguanian, the eastern bearded dragon, Pagona barbata. Additionally, the symptoms following bites from 3 monitor lizard species are no longer interpreted solely as the result of bacterial infection but as the result of active venom secretion. The first lizards resembling squamates appeared in the Upper Permian and Lower Triassic of South Africa. Additional fossils were found in Upper Triassic strata in England and North America. Their skeletons are significantly more primitive than those of the recent taxa. Therefore, they are classified as a separate taxon, Eolocertilia. They quickly conquered new habitats and displaced the previously dominant lizard-like reptiles, such as the procolophonids, Millerosaurs, and Eosuchians. Almost no squamate fossils are known from the Jurassic period. It is only in the late Jurassic that fossil finds reappear in China and Europe. These can be assigned to the present-day large taxa Geckoda, Syncomorpha, and Anguimorpha. The Euposaurus found in France is placed in the iguanian family due to its acrodont teeth, on the upper edge of the jaw. The gliding Shanglong from the Lower Cretaceous of China belongs to the same group of relatives. Diapsids appeared with numerous species in the Upper Cretaceous of North America and Central Asia. From the same period come the first anguimorphs, xenosaurids, beaded lizards, and monitor lizards, as well as Dinoslizia from Patagonia, the first well-known snake. The snake Pachyraches found in Israel has more than 200 ribs, atrophied pelvic girdles and hind limbs, but has completely lost its forelimbs and shoulder girdle. Overall, the fossil record of snakes from the Cretaceous and Lower Tertiary is very incomplete. The Upper Cretaceous is also the heyday of marine squamates, such as Aegialosaurs and the giant mosasaurs, which occurred worldwide in the seas with almost 20 genera and reached lengths of up to 18 meters. The skulls of both groups resembled those of monitor lizards, but also show anatomical similarities with large snakes. Both taxa fell victim to the Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction event 65 million years ago. From the Paleocene, there are the first fossils of amphisbaenians. Typhlopoids and colubrids appear in the Eocene, vipers and elapids in the Miocene. The radiation of snakes probably coincides with the spread of small mammals, an important prey. Chameleons can also be traced in Europe and Africa since the Miocene. The Elapidae are a family of snakes, serpents, that includes over 380 species. They form the second large group of venomous snakes alongside vipers, Viperidae. Within the elapids, there are many species with highly effective neurotoxins, such as taipans, cobras, mambas, tiger snakes, and brown snakes. Unlike colubrids, colubridae, elapids produce a venomous secretion that can be injected into prey or a potential enemy through venomous fangs located at the front of the jaw. Elapids differ from closely related colubrids through their specialized venomous fangs, lateral nostrils, and the absence of a loreal scale. Some genera have an expandable neck hood that is spread in a threat display. Sea snakes exhibit a body structure adapted to life in the sea with various modifications of internal and external anatomy. The most important difference from colubrids lies in the structure of the venom apparatus and the venomous fangs. These fangs are located at the front of the jaw and are proteroglyphic, fixed, groove-fanged, possessing a venom groove through which snake venom flows. In some species, such as the South African spitting cobra, Hemicatus hemicatus, these teeth are modified so that the snakes can spit venom several meters. Elapids live in almost all tropical and subtropical regions and are found on all continents except Europe and Antarctica. Additionally, the sea snakes belonging to them are found in large parts of warm marine areas, especially in the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. The family forms the most species-rich group among the snakes present in Australia, whereas, on other continents, vipers are mostly and colubrids are always more species-rich. That's it with Arbok. Next week, we'll take care of Raichu and its relationship with Rattata, which is also a rodent. Feel free to subscribe to our channel, leave a like, and check back.